Kia ora te whānau a iho karaiti ko Andrew Tabudeaho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 9th of June 2024. It's Mark chapter 3 verses 20 through to 35. The crowd, they came together so that Jesus and his disciples could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, "He's gone out of his mind." And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, "He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons he casts out demons." And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. "How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit there can never be forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin, for they said, "He has an unclean spirit." Then his mother and brothers came, and standing outside he sent to them and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside, asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" Looking around at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my mother and sister and brother." Have you had those times where things have gone really well, and then almost immediately afterwards everything started to go pear-shaped, just as the pressure somehow seems to come on? The low follows immediately after the high. Success, then feeling like it's all going wrong, almost like being under attack, which in fact you could be. See, the background to the text that we've read today is that in the verses preceding our reading, Jesus has just appointed his 12. Out of all his followers, he selected 12 who will be apostles. We'll come to that in a minute. And then immediately the pressure comes on. People, people, people. Not even time to eat. And Jesus' mental competence and mental health are called into question. He's psychotic, he's delusional, and family and friends are summoned to come and take him away. And the religious leaders are coming up from Jerusalem, and they're weighing in, boldly asserting demonic possession. Let's observe the nature of these attacks against Jesus. I want to suggest they go right back to the original temptations, the desert temptations. And I think they can kind of be summed up by the simple expression, "So, you think you're the Son of God, do you?" And here he is. He's just appointed the 12. He's about to ramp up his ministry. And then we have these temptations coming in as we see the circumstances of what's going on. See, you can't even look after this lot. You've not even got time to eat. You're delusional. You're nutty. And so we've sent for your family and childhood friends to come and take you away. At worst, you're demon-possessed, Son of God indeed. We'll see about that. Here's the thing. These attacks against Jesus are at his most vulnerable point. The question of his identity, of his relationship with the one he calls Abba, Papa, Daddy, and uses these titles as titled to address God, claiming a deep familiarity and profound intimacy. It's outrageous. How dare he? These are a reprise of the temptations in the desert. This is seen as potentially Jesus' weakest point, and it's here at this weakest point, presumably, that he's being attacked. The reality is that for most of us, attacks won't happen at the same place as for Jesus, or necessarily as one another. We all have fault lines running through our lives. Whether you're aware of it or not, you do. And I suspect for the most part we're likely to know best where they actually are. These are generally the places of greatest vulnerability, when we're at our highest or lowest, when we've just been engaged in something amazing, or when we're overtired, when our relationships aren't as strong as we might hope, when we're less than optimally healthy, when our sense of security is threatened in some way. So the fault lines we have tend to be the places of likely attack. Because unless you're aware of your vulnerability, unless I'm aware of mine, and we've taken measures to guard and to bolster our defences at those points, whether by accountability or support structures, to the extent that they are no longer the primary point of attack, then if we've done those things, the battleground, I want to suggest, may simply shift elsewhere. We're invited to be vigilant. In Luke's Gospel, at the end of the desert temptations, we read, when the devil had finished all this tempting, he left him until an opportune time. I'm wanting to suggest that at this moment of the appointing of the 12 is one such opportune time. This is one of those times when Jesus' ministry is about to ratchet up. He's just appointed 12 apostles, and apostles means sent ones. It's reasonable to imply and to assume that he's preparing to send them out, hence multiplying his effective ministry. So the attack comes to get him to back away. For many of us coming under this kind of pressure, in Jesus' situation, the temptation and the inclination would be to back away. You may be thinking, no, I wouldn't. But that's because you're not Jesus. You're not the Son of God. You're not called to save the world, and you know all that unless you're psychotic, delusional, or demon-possessed, this is unlikely to be a problem for you. The attack on Jesus is not likely to be one that will be most effective on you. See, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that these attacks tend to be tailor-made. They're specific. They're crafted especially designed for the subject being addressed. Each one saying, what's the most effective way of getting at him or at her, and undermining them, of destroying their sense of confidence, of causing them to back away from what God might be calling them to. See, attacks upon you likely come from a completely different direction, especially attacking you at your weakest points, where you're currently likely to be most vulnerable. And only you know where that is. And I'm confident that for most of us this is true. Jesus faces this attack head on. It's questioning his identity. It's questioning his authority. It's questioning his sanity. It's questioning his spiritual purity. Does he throw in the towel? No, he doesn't. Is he oblivious to the pressure? Does he not notice the attacks? Of course he does. He clearly does. And he responds, as you read the text, to each one of them. He's not being put off. Notice again what he does. He responds to each of these attacks and he carries on. The next verse, which is the opening of the next chapter, begins with this. And Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that had gathered around him was so large that he got into a boat and sat it out on the lake where all the people were along the shore at the water's edge. And he taught them many things. Jesus doesn't back away from what God has called him to. He's even got strategies to mitigate his greatest challenges, and see how he puts that into effect. He's not being put off. It would be easy, it would be natural to be a little bit rattled by the attacks that he's been under. And so it may be true for you also. You've been in the situation where things are going well, where you may have been invited, you may have said yes to an opportunity for a significant ministry moment, believing this to be the Lord's invitation to you. And then you started to feel like the wheels are coming off. The things are starting to go wrong, that the pressure's coming on, that you're starting to doubt yourself and the grace of God at work in you. You've been made aware of your shortcomings and lack of capacity, and start to doubt whether or no you can follow through, or the call you've been invited, on the call that you've been invited into. And what's the temptation? The temptation is to back out from the things you've said yes to. Have you done this? Well, to my shame, I have. I wasn't aware of what I'm saying to you now, and that's maybe my out. I've said, yep, guilty as charged to the attack, and backed away, having a sense that there had to be someone better suited, more qualified, more spiritual, less of a hypocrite, more ready to take on this particular task. And Jesus shows us a way forward. And it's to say that, well, there's a sense that if God has called me in this, I'm not backing out, even though I may not feel able to follow through, because God is able. I can't do it, perhaps, but God can. And I think that is a point at which we're able to draw real strength. The thing is that Jesus knows where all this negativity comes from. And we can too. Discouragement is one of the biggest killers of Christian ministry. And we know where it comes from. I think one of the most interesting, most informative and empowering texts we find on this is in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 12 verses 9 and 10. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a voice in heaven say, Now have come the salvation, and the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. Hear that last sentence again. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. The primary activity of the enemy of our souls is accusation. It's discouragement. And I want to suggest this works in two ways. This first is that this one is accusing us before God. It's like he's whispering in God's ear, look at him now. this is one that you claim that you love and that claims that he loves you. Just look at him. Look at what he's saying. Look at what he's doing. Look at the cringing way that he's behaving. Look at his sin. Just look at him. Pathetic. How could you love such a one? You need to write him off. He's not worth it. And at the same time, sitting on our shoulder and say, just look at you now. You're a complete waste of space. You think that God can love you? You think that God can forgive you with all that you're doing, with the attitudes, with the behaviours, with the things that are in your heart, with the things that you engage in so readily, the things that come out of your mouth? You think that those things are forgivable? Come on. You're hopeless. You're a waste of space. Just give it up and crawl back into that hole from which you came. You've heard it all. And what we read is that the process is constant. Who accuses them before God day and night. Day and night. But what does Jesus say? Well, I think it's kind of inferred. He ultimately says something like, nah, I've heard that all before. Ultimately, it didn't work the last time, though you had me going for a while. And it's certainly not going to work this time. Go away. And I want to suggest, friends, that this is potentially one of the most effective strategies. Simply to say, go away. I'm aware of your devices. I'm aware of what you're trying to do. Go away. Try it. I'm serious. Try it. I have, and I think generally it works. The trick is to be aware, the trick is to notice, and the trick is to respond appropriately. Amen. God bless you.